Men who were sexually abused as children are coming out and revealing the horrors they faced. These brave survivors like Abhhydday, Rohan Kokane, Rajeev Pandey, Ali and many more have decided to speak out for one reason and one reason only, to break the silence.
क्योंकि लोगों ने जिसको मैं अपना समझ के अगर बताना भी चाहा ना कि मेरे साथ ऐसा हो रहा है, इसको स्टॉप किया जाए, तो लोगों ने क्या बोला, इसमें तू भी तो इन्वॉल्व हो सकता है. 7-8 साल का, 9 साल का, 10 साल का बच्चा क्या इन्वॉल्व रहेगा उसमें?
I am a survivor of child sexual abuse. I was raped from the age of 7 to the age of 18. I personally believe that men and boys are victims of their own patriarchy. You know, about the patriarchy that exists in our society, and we are victims of patriarchy, and that's why it's so important that we break this silence as much as we can.
These survivors living in silence all these years will now be lending their face and voice to a soon-to-be-released photo campaign by Mumbai-based filmmaker and activist Insia Dariwala.
The reality of boys suffering from sexual abuse is now going public after the boys who have been suffered as abuse in his children are gathered courage and are speaking their stories to the public. Abbhyuday, now 21, has to hide his abuse that he has faced from his army uncle, from his mother, lifetime, and even the Rohan and the Rajiv has the same past experience of child abuse.
Started talking to certain survivors, adult survivors, we realized that this story of boys needs to be told. And why is there not enough work being done on men too? Because today, as per our statistics, which was released by the Women and Child Ministry in 2007, 52% of boys are also being sexually abused. They have been abused.
The only report on male sexual abuse in India was released in 2007. It revealed that of 69% children who were sexually abused, 54.68% were boys. Reason enough to have that conversation we have been shying away from. So on the urban debate today, we ask, India, are you ready to talk about boys who are raped?
I think it's a good thing, people are speaking up about it, because until now, boys never came and expressed what they felt. We're all conditioned that boys have to bear pain, they have to tolerate a lot of things. It's all part of manhood.
This is a start of something really huge to maintain mental health in our society, which nobody really addresses.
नहीं, पेरेंट के अलावा भी आसपास के लोगों को भी ध्यान देना चाहिए. ये जो भी हो रहा है वो तो बिल्कुल गलत ही हो रहा है.
Mirror Now report.
Good evening, viewers. You're watching the Urban Debate and Mirror Now. I'm Faye Souza. Thank you for tuning in. We're dedicating our prime time tonight to our children. Today's topic at 8 p.m. we're talking about abuse, not just of little girls but also of little boys. This is something we don't talk about enough as a society, and our appeal tonight is to simply protect our boys too. If you're a parent watching and you have a young child at home, there are things you must know as to how to tell if your son is in distress, how to have that conversation with your child, how to caution your child, how to make sure that your child comes to you and talks about these things if they're facing any sort of distress. Statistics show us shockingly that over 50% of the children who are abused are boys. We have to be as aware of what's happening with our boys as we are of our girls. A family that has daughters tends to be really protective. We're fully aware of the risks that our daughters might encounter on the streets, in school, if they're out by themselves. Are we just as aware of the risks that our sons will face on a daily basis? Our appeal tonight is very simple. Let's protect our boys too. And we have today's survivors who are going to talk about their experiences. I do advise those viewers watching at home for some discretion. If you have younger children, you don't want them to sit through this particular show, then I advise you as parents to make that decision. But I would like you to have the conversation with your children after the show, because that's the whole purpose of this episode. Joining me on the show this evening, Insia Dariwala, Mumbai-based filmmaker and child rights activist. Harish Iyer is an equal rights activist and a survivor who will talk to us in the studio. Deepika Bharadwaj is also a filmmaker and someone who fights for men's rights. We'll have Dr. Shrradha Sidhwani join us through the course of this conversation. She's a clinical psychologist. Jerry Johnson is a speaker on human rights. Uday Sahay is a former IPS officer. Abhhydday Pathak is a survivor, and Mohammad Ali is also a survivor, all of whom join us in the course of this conversation. Anjali Pawar is the president of an NGO called Sakhee, who specifically works in issues of crime against women. I'm going to start with Harish. Harish, it's very important for us to have this conversation. It's important to bring it up to the level of talking about it at prime time on national television because it's so real. Why did you begin, and why do you think that we should talk about this right now?
I think I began with a very selfish reason because I had bottled up, I was abused for 11 years and I'd bottled this up inside, I bottled this story inside me for 11 years. And every time I tried telling this to people, I tried telling it to my mother would not understand. So the first time I told my mother was like, I told her that I was bleeding from my anus, and my mother just looked at me and she said that, oh, that's because you eat too many mangoes. The second time when I tried telling my mother was like, I told my mother that my uncle touches me here and there and I don't like it. And my mother said that, okay, don't go close to your uncle. So at that time, that 7-year-old, that 12-year-old, that 15-year-old boy, when he tried speaking out and when he didn't find any support, I understood that it was important that I speak up, not for changing the world or to help other survivors. That was not in my mind at all. I spoke because I needed to speak out for me to survive, because I had bottled this up for many years. I did it with a very selfish motive that I wanted to help myself, and the only way that I would help myself is by speaking about it.
So tell us something, for those parents who are listening at home right now, Harish, obviously parents need to understand how to deal with these problems. And the worst thing a parent could possibly do is to tell the child to walk it off or deal with it, or boys shouldn't cry. What sort of an impact did that have for you?
I think the fact that I felt extremely lonely at times, I had this, it was like a wall, pushed to a wall where you just scream and you hear your own voice echoing back. You find no support from your family. They don't get the hints because in our country we don't even speak about sex. We don't speak about sex. We don't give nicknames to our body parts. So even the culture of speaking about abuse or speaking about this thing, every time I went out with my sister, I would be told that, okay, you need to protect her. Every time I was out, so I became like the designated protector, and that made it even more difficult, So I always say this, that men and boys are victims of their own patriarchy, and we need to acknowledge that, and that's why it's important that people who can speak should speak, because I know that there would be someone who would be watching, who would be listening from in some corner of the world, and they would see a glimmer of hope with that.
I want to bring in Uday Sahay, who's a former IPS officer, very senior IPS officer. Mr. Sahay, we've had several conversations on this show about the rights of women and protecting women. How often are cases about young boys reported? How often are they taken seriously? Do you recommend that people come to the police at all? Do people actually approach the police in these cases?
Well, my experience says that police is approached only when people are completely cornered in such cases, in the sense that unless it has led to gross violence on the body of the young boy, they don't reach out to the police. So the kind of experiences that were shared by my friend on the television right now are not even reported. Only when they are violated, number one. Number two, in cases of girls, you have a term called rape. But in cases of such violence committed on boys, it's called unnatural offense. So as somebody rightly said, that we don't even talk about sex openly, who will talk about unnatural offense? And it's really creditable that you have picked up a forbidden subject like this, which needs to be discussed threadbare rationally, so that we can take some preventive steps apart from the punitive steps that police is supposed to take.
Absolutely, Mr. Sahay, very well said. I just want to ask Anjali Pawar this question. Anjali, while we say protect our boys too, we're not just saying this to parents, we're also saying it to lawmakers and to the police and to government, because we don't have a law. Like Mr. Sahay pointed out, we don't. So this is the problem. We have POCSO to protect children. That ends, its jurisdiction ends at the age of 18, when the victim turns 18. After that, the law against rape is specific to women. We don't have a law specifically for men. So not only do we as parents need to protect our boys. Mr. Sahay, go ahead.
Let me correct the position here. There is an offence called unnatural offence, which is covered under 377 IPC. But the definition of unnatural offence itself is rather vague, and this is the high time where you have a clarity on this, which is absent currently.
Right. Anjali Pawar.
Yeah, I would like to say in this regard, means the study which you mentioned in this show, I was a part of that study, and I did it for Maharashtra. And it was not only men who is abusing these boys or men. It's always women as well who are abusing these boys, because while doing this study, we came across one boy who was a 12-year-old and was asking one of the interviewer from our group that, are you having a girlfriend? And this boy never understood what he's asking. But that time he told us that he's having 4 girlfriends, and who are at the age of 40 and something like that. So this is not only men are abusing men, but there are women as well who are abusing these boys, and they are not understanding because of this age that they were abused by these women. So this is also, we need to understand that not only anal sex or man making raped man is only abuse on boys, but there are women who are also abusing the boys. And through that study, we made so many of such kind of children and adult people who abused by such kind of people, women and men both.
True.
So POCSO is there, but up to 18 years, as you said, up to only 18 years, it's covered all these sections, and 377 IPC is also there. But as everybody says that no one is talking about this abuse regarding boys. So somebody needs to start talking about that and file cases about that. Then only something will change. Otherwise, no one is going to talk about this.
I also want to tell our viewers at this point that our phone lines are open, and we have people on the panel who can answer any question that you might want to ask. You do not have to tell us your name. If you're a parent or a victim or anybody else who wants to call us, you do not have to give us your name if you want to ask a question tonight. Abhyuday Pathak joins us as well as Mohammad Ali. I'm going to go to Mohammad Ali first, who is a survivor who has chosen to speak out. Tell us why you want to speak out, and tell us, और हमें ये बताइए कि आपको क्या कहना है अभी, जो बाकी सारे जो जितने सारे लड़के देख रहे हैं अभी, आप उनसे क्या कहेंगे?
जी, मैं सभी लोगों से ये कहना, लोग सोचते हैं ना कि मतलब खाली लड़की 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 ऐसा, मतलब लड़कियों के साथ ही ऐसा होता है ना? तो लड़कियों के साथ नहीं, मतलब हम लोग को इस तरह से यूज़ किया जाता है जैसे हम लोग को कुछ मालूम नहीं होता है। और मतलब वो एक एज में जब वो मतलब बंदे के साथ कुछ मतलब एक्टिविटीज़ इस तरह की गंदी हरकतें करते हैं, तो वो सामने वाला जो बंदा होता है उसको तो इंटरटेन हो रहा है, बाकी छोटा बच्चा है उसको क्या मालूम रहता है। बस वो क्या करता है, एक टॉफ़ी की वजह से या 2-4 रुपये की वजह से ऐसा कुछ भी लालच उसको, और उसको कैसा लगता है कि ये मुझसे मतलब कि ये मेरे से अट्रैक्ट, मेरा केयर कर रहा है ये, और उसकी वजह से वो मतलब कि अब्यूज़ होता है। और ये जो है मतलब समाज जो है, हमारी समाज जो हम लोग क्या करते हैं कि किसी से बता भी नहीं सकते कि यार हमारे साथ ऐसा हुआ, क्योंकि हम लोग का सर्कल जिस तरह से रहता है कि समाज हमारे को सपोर्ट नहीं करता है, कि बोलेंगे तो क्या बोलता है कि तुम लोग भी तो ऐसा करते हो, तो है ना कि वो हाँ।
मोहम्मद जी, आप
हेलो,
आप मुझे ये बता दीजिए, आप किस उम्र में आपने किसी को बताने की ट्राई की थी, और जब आपने अपने परिवार वालों को, अपने पेरेंट्स को बताया तो क्या हुआ?
मैं जब अंडर 11 तक पहुंचा, मतलब ये तो चल ही रहा था, फिर मैं सोचा कि बताऊं। तो एक दिन ऐसा ही मैंने एक छोटा मेरा फ्रेंड था, तो उसको मैंने बताया कि यार मेरे साथ ये बंदा है ना, ऐसा इस तरह से आता है और मेरा मतलब इस तरह से हरकत करता है मेरे साथ वो। तो जो पेरेंट्स है उनके पास जाने के लिए मेरा हिम्मत नहीं हो रहा था, तो उसने क्या करा, मुझे सपोर्ट किया और बोला कि थोड़ा सा एक काम कर, तू चल और मैं बोलूँगा तू खड़ा रहना, बस हाँ या ना में बोलना। तो मैं गया और अपने उस पेरेंट्स से बोला कि देखो मैं आंटी मेरे साथ ऐसा ऐसा फलाना बंदा ऐसा कर रहा है ना। तो उसने बोला कि मैं तेरे को एक सोशल वर्कर के पास भेजता, तू उनके पास बताना, उस लड़के के ऊपर अपन एक्शन लेंगे। तो जब मैं वहाँ जाकर के उस सोशल वर्कर से ये सारी बात मैं बता रहा था, तो सब सुनने के बाद क्या बोलती हो सोशल वर्कर कि अरे हो सकता है कि इसमें तू भी इन्वॉल्व होगा। तो मैं रोने लग गया। मैं बोला ये कैसा होएगा, मेरे को कुछ मालूम ही नहीं यार, इनको इतना लंबा लेक्चर देने के बाद ये मुझे बोलती है कि यार तू भी इन्वॉल्व होगा इसमें। तो इसके बाद से मैंने किसी को बताना छोड़ दिया, मतलब कि यार कुछ होता ही नहीं है, फोकट में इनको बता के मतलब क्या है। फिर उसके बाद में वो बंदा मेरे को मतलब 3 साल अंडर 11 से 14 तक मेरे साथ मतलब कि रेगुलर नहीं। तो उसके बाद में मैं मतलब वो सब लड़के लोग जो थे वो लोग मेरे को सपोर्ट करने लग गए।
तो फिर आपने कब डिसाइड किया कि आप इसके बारे में ऐसे बात करेंगे?
मैं अभी तक मतलब अभी जो मैं अभी अंडर 17 ईयर्स का हो चुका हूँ मैं अभी, है ना। तो एक दीदी है इंसिया दरीवाल मैम, तो ये हमारे कैफे में मतलब ऐसा ही कुछ चाय वाय पीने के लिए आए थे। तो उनसे मुलाकात मतलब ऐसा कोइंसिडेंस बोलूँगा मैं मेरे लिए कि मेरा ये कि एक मेरे अंदर जो दबा हुआ है ये है ना, ज्वाला है, गुस्सा है, जो भी है, एक तरह से एक चिंगारी की तौर से मेरे लिए ये फूटने का जरिया बना। और किसी को मैं अपना थोड़ा जो मतलब अंदर जो गुस्सा है वो निकाल के थोड़ा ठंडा करने का, क्योंकि इससे लोगों को जो ये देखेंगे तो उनको शर्म आएगी खुद के उनके खुद के ऊपर कि यार ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए। एक अपना 2 मिनट कुछ सेकंड के मतलब खुद का इंटरटेन की वजह से दूसरों का कैरियर और माइंड खराब होता है, सेटअप खराब हो जाता है पूरा। ना वो पढ़ पाता है बच्चा, ना कुछ कर पाता है, सिर्फ ये 2 चीज थिंकिंग रखते दिमाग में कि यार अपने एंजॉय ये क्या है ये। तो इंसिया दीदी जी ने मेरे को बताया कि देख अली तेरे साथ ऐसा हुआ। उन्होंने बोला कि अरे ऐसा नहीं सबके साथ होता है, बट मेरे आंखों में आंसू आ गया, नहीं सबके साथ ऐसा नहीं होता है। उसमें से मैं एक खतरनाक है जो मेरे साथ ऐसा हुआ। वो हर किसी को लगता है कि मेरे साथ बहुत कुछ हुआ, मगर जब मैं बताएगा भी तो ओपनली मैंने, क्योंकि तुमने देखा नहीं है, कुछ देखा जिन लोगों के साथ होता है वो मानता है कि ऐसा होता है। दीदी ने बोला कि नहीं तुझे तू मेरे को बता जैसा होगा, जो भी टाइम मिलता है तेरे को। तो हमेशा मेरे को दीदी फ़ोन पे या कभी पर्सनली मुलाकात करके मेरे से पूछती रहती थी। और इंसिया दीदी की वजह से मतलब मैं एक कोशिश किया बोलने का और सबके सामने आ रहा है।
I want to just acknowledge right now that these 3 people, Harish Iyer, Mohammad Ali and Abhhydday Pathak, who are talking to us on national television at prime time, are such examples of bravery, and they are putting themselves out there so that other boys do not have to go through the same thing, that other children are protected, that parents know what to look out for, and parents can protect children and know how to deal with these problems if they occur. Especially Mohammad Ali, right now, I want to applaud your bravery. आप जैसे आए हमारे शो पे और आपने साफ साफ बताया कि आपके साथ क्या हुआ, आपकी ये बात सुन के बाकी लोगों की जो घर पे देख रहे हैं वो अपने बच्चों को शायद प्रोटेक्ट कर पाएंगे. I want to bring in right now Abhhydday Pathak as well. Tell us what your story is.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. As a kid, I was a very playful, joyful person. I would love to go to these parks and play with animals, rabbits and roosters. I think I grew up reading Thumbelina and The Little Red Riding Hood, so that inspired me a lot. I was 5 years old when, for the first time, I was raped. I was in the cage, and my perpetrator, who was an army defense personnel, grabbed hold one of the rabbits and gave me and told me to come to one secluded spot of that park. And trusting him, I went to that spot. And it started very innocently. It started with give uncle a kiss on the cheek, पेट क्या खाया है, and I want to listen कि क्या है पेट के अंदर. and that's how he started undressing me. Post that, when I was penetrated, that was the time that I realized that this is something which is not right. And I told him that I want to leave, that I want to go. But he grabbed hold of my mouth and raped me at that point of time.
Did you tell anybody?
I couldn't, because post that he told me things like that the shame was mine. I didn't even know that it's his fault. I immediately took it as my own fault, my shame. And I thought that I am the bad person here. And I remember bleeding from the anus, and I was so scared. It was like I wanted, because of the shame and the guilt and the fear associated, because since childhood we are supposed to be strong, and if anything happens it's our fault at times. So I think that's what led me to hide things. And so my underwear was wet in blood, and I couldn't do anything. I wanted to hide. So I reached home. That was the first time I wiped my own ass, I remember. Before that, my mother used to do that for me. And I threw the underwear, because it wasn't possible to hide it anywhere. I couldn't wash clothes. So I threw the underwear so that my mother doesn't find out. I was raped over a period of 2 years because I wanted to avoid discovery at that point of time. It was necessary for me that people don't know my secret at that time. So it continued to happen on a very regular basis.
Abbhyuday, tell us why you decided to speak out now.
I decided to speak out because I want to let everybody know, that people who've gone through something, to know that they are not alone. It's not their fault. They don't need to be quiet. They don't need to be apologetic. They don't need to hide themselves to make somebody else feel comfortable. So I think it's very, very important to break silence. And I met a couple of very, very courageous people a few weeks ago. And when we shared a survivor story, it created a ripple effect in me. It somehow touched parts of me which were not touched before. And that's how I think I started to feel better. I started to feel stronger. I started to feel that it's not my fault. So I think I am speaking out because I've experienced it, that when a person speaks out, how helpful and how good it is for a survivor.
Well, I think you're extremely brave, Abbhyuday. Thank you so much for speaking with us, and stay with us to add, to add to your story. I want to bring in Insia Dariwala. Insia Dariwala is the person who brought these people together, who told these people that their stories should be told, that they're not alone, that they should be allowed, they should tell their stories to the whole world. And we appreciate her for that. Tell us how you came upon the idea, why you decided to work on something like this, and why you think it's important to tell the story.
Hi Faye, first of all, thank you for doing this special on such a sensitive issue, and also giving us an opportunity to actually bring all these survivors on your show. This entire experience is not something that has just come about. It's a personal journey that has been going on inside of me for a long, long time. And I was sexually abused at the age of 10, and I think like Harish said, that as a survivor, the minute you start sharing, and there is a selfish motive in that sharing, you want other people to know that this is your story, and you also want them to tell your story. So if there are survivors out there, and if there is a story that resonates with them, it kind of gave me hope that I'm not alone. And I think that's one of the reasons why we call this campaign End the Isolation. So coming back to your question of why this happened and why choose this kind of platform to talk about the survivors. So I have always been someone who, has gravitated towards the visual art medium. And as a filmmaker, I think visually, I ideate visually. And this is just an extent, of that creative, art that I carry within me. So when the last time I did my first film was on child sexual abuse, and that was a catharsis for me. Catharsis because I think that was the first time that I acknowledged that there is a story within me that needs to be told. And during that time I also met my husband, and my husband is a survivor too. And I think I shifted from making the character of my film from a girl to a boy because of him. Because I actually felt that, I'm not the only one who's sexually abused, and I always used to feel that men are bad, all men are bad. And obviously being abused by a man, it's a very natural reaction to men. But after meeting him and many other survivors who were male, that reaction kind of changed within me. And I was very glad because after the release of that film, there were lots of men who came up to me and told me that thank you for showing male child sexual abuse because nobody wants to talk about it. So post that, we did a couple of other films in this space of sexual violence, and we also had last year an art installation put up at Kala Ghoda Festival which talked about child sexual abuse, and it was very well received. Close to 1.5 lakh people came and engaged in a dialogue on something, on a topic that nobody wants to even think about. So that just became much more of an impetus for me to go forward and do this. So that's why the photo campaign came about.
Right, so I want to bring this back to why we're doing this tonight here on the Urban Debate, because which parent doesn't want to protect their children, girls or boys, from sexual abuse as much as you want to protect them when they're crossing the street? It's so important for us as parents to find out how to tell if your child is in distress, how to make sure that your child is comfortable coming to you and talking to you about something that's going on. How do you communicate with your child? How do you create a safe environment so your child comes running to you as soon as something even slightly out of the ordinary has taken place? And what happens to children who are shunted out by their parents saying that this is not such a big deal, don't worry about it, don't go there anymore? What sort of an impact does that have on their minds? I want to bring in Dr. Sidhwani, who's a clinical psychologist. We've heard these stories of these wonderful gentlemen who've come forward and shared what happened to them. What sort of an impact does this kind of abuse have on a small child's mind if the parent is not involved or the parent is not able to help?
So I think there are a different variety of emotions that come. The child can internalize the blame. Of course, he's very confused. He doesn't know what's happened. Any form of abuse, whether it's male or female, it's very difficult for a child to emote. So it becomes very difficult for children to say that they have been touched or they've been wrongly abused. Generally, children are very fearful. They tend to hide it. I think what parents should do is look for signs and symptoms in terms of behavior. So if the child, turns very aggressive or he becomes very passive, starts throwing tantrums, avoids the environment. So if there is any form of abuse in school, the child starts to move away from school. If there's any form of abuse at home by the caretakers, the child starts getting scared at home. Then any change in daily activity, the child becomes less active and more aggressive. So these are common signs which you will see in children.
But Dr. Sidhwani, a lot of children cry when they have to go to school, and parents just assume that this is just a child who's throwing a tantrum saying, "Mujhe school nahi jana hai." All children do that. At what point should it turn into a red flag that there's something wrong in the school, or the child needs to be protected from the school itself?
So there is, of course, like you said, Faye, a lot of children cry to go to school, but that's more of an initial phase where you have a separation anxiety. But suddenly when the child has settled into school and then there's a drastic change and there is an avoidance towards school, there's an anger towards school, many children have, start failing in academics. So you see a very significant behavioral change in the child. Now, for most parents who are working, who do not notice it, the teachers tend to pick it up and they tend to inform the parents. There are counseling sessions in school as well. So there are some some signs which you will notice in your child, whether male or female, he's been abused, you will see certain signs of aggression, about passive behavior, his social activity goes down, he's not engaging in sports, things like that.
Right. So I want to open this up for the panel right now. If any of you have anything to say, just hold up your hand and let me know you want to come in. Don't wait to be called upon. I'm going to go now to Deepika Bharadwaj, who's a filmmaker. Deepika Bharadwaj, it's so important to talk about these stories, and the more survivors who are brave enough to actually share their stories, more people will come out and talk about it. Uday Sahay, I see your hand come up. I'm going to come to you straight after this. Deepika Bharadwaj, go ahead.
Faye, first of all, thank you so much for organizing this panel, and I must congratulate Insia for taking this up and organizing. She started a campaign also on change.org specifically for the WCD minister. I think that's a great step to bring some attention to this issue. Male sexual abuse, whether boys or men, is not usually talked about, and since you shared the data by WCD ministry, it's a 2007 report. After 10 years, we are starting to even talk about it. What I specifically want to mention over here is the way we are bringing out communication on child sexual abuse. I think there's a big gap over there, which is sort of telling our boys that they can't talk about it. Whenever we see pictorial representation of any communication on sexual abuse, it is usually a girl and the perpetrator is a man. So we don't even bring any other equation into that when we talk about these things, when we are campaigning about these things, visual communication if we talk about. So it is always sort of assumed that the victim would be a girl and the perpetrator would be a man. Like another panelist very rightly said, there are boys who are abused by women also. And one thing that I really want to share with everybody, in fact request everybody who is watching this show today, is to sort of get away with the stereotype that boys enjoy it. When we have sort of come to a point where we are starting to understand that consent is very important, then if a boy says no, whether to a man or a woman for a sexual relationship, it means no. It doesn't mean that the boy would enjoy. And I think these are the stereotypes that actually prevent boys from coming out and sharing their stories. And I think there's a huge need for social workers also to be sensitized to this. We heard one of the survivors talking how the social worker behaved. So I think the social workers also need to be sensitized that these boys need to be listened to. And the way boys react to sexual abuse, Faye, I have personally spoken to a boy who was sexually abused by his maid, and he was constantly threatened and actually told that nobody would believe you. Nobody will sort of even understand that, a woman would do something wrong to you.
Yes.
So yes. I think there's a lot of sensitization that needs to happen. These social workers and boys behave differently. So this different behavior needs to, a girl may respond very differently to a sexual abuse. A boy may behave absolutely differently.
Jerry Johnson, I want to bring in Jerry Johnson.
The schemes that we are
right. The damage that we do,
that the government does.
Right.
I think there needs to be sensitization on how to react.
Okay, fair enough. Jerry Johnson speaks for human rights. The section, or the IPC section 377 is really vague and is not strong enough.
Right, fair. No, I'm glad we are bringing the topic of consent and also the law 377. The problem is our lawmakers don't really understand the kind of laws that they either create or uphold. Recently, in a very different case, in a slightly different case, this current government went to the Supreme Court and actually said that we, the Indians, we do not own our bodies. Fundamentally, this issue is about who owns your body. If you look at what rape is and what it's different from sex, rape and sex is different because of consent. And when you grant consent, you're essentially saying, okay, I'm willing to engage with you intimately with my body, which I own. And rape is at most intimate violation of that ownership. And, so adults can get raped, including men or women or any gender, and children are unable to give consent, and therefore any kind of intimate violation of their bodies is considered to be rape. It's considered to be abuse because children below the legal age are unable to give consent.
Yes.
So our lawmakers don't really understand this fundamental premise. Who owns your body? Do you own your body? Or someone else? Does society?
Right.
Does the government? And that makes you a slave, doesn't it?
You know, Uday Sahay, the IPC section 377, like you pointed out, for unnatural offences, it basically says whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman or animal shall be punished. Now this doesn't, like was just pointed out by Jerry, it doesn't mention consent. This could technically make both parties, including the victim, guilty.
And in fact, I mean, sorry to interject, that's one of the reasons why many of these victims, male victims in particular, do
Never
not come out.
Never come out.
Because they are at risk of being arrested as
well. Uday Sahay, is the law, I mean, does the law protect the victims in these cases?
The law is, I mean, rightly observed, the law is very, not nuanced. It's quite evasive and also discriminatory vis-a-vis the female child. I'll explain to you how.
Yes.
I mean, in case of woman or female child, you have a shades of law, starting with 376, that's one. Then you have different shades of 376. Then you have outraging the modesty of woman. Then you have 354, 509, Representation of Women Act, etc. But in case of boys, unless they are completely violated, there's no recourse to law. I mean, the kind of cases that other members on the panel are discussing, there is a foreplay, there is a kind of a prelude to the final violation. Where do you go? I mean, there's no law where the male boys who is abused, even if you are abused, unless you are sexually intercoursed, you have no recourse to law. And this is completely...
No, but Mr. Sahay, POCSO protects children of both genders up until the age of 18.
Yes.
So there is a law. The question is, how often will a police officer sitting in a thana takes a complaint like this seriously?
Yes.
Well, POCSO, you have rightly mentioned, is a generic law which is applicable to both.
One thing I also wish to add...
Yeah, one second, Mr. Sahay, please go ahead.
Yeah, what I was trying to explain, that POCSO is a generic law which applies to both. But in case of female child, there are nuances of other shades of violations. And therefore, it is, and rightly so, but so far, because of the subject not being brought out in open, not discussed, not debated, the other nuances of violation in case of male child has not really been legislated. And I'm sure this debate would give rise to such may open a scope for that.
Right, and I just want to be, like I told you, our phone lines are open and they're ringing continuously, and I want to be able to address as many of the people who've called us tonight. Praveen is on the phone line from Mumbai. Praveen, go ahead, we can hear you.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Praveen.
Basically, I'm a bit lost. Basically, I didn't hear what was going on, so I'll rather share my views thoda samay baad.
Yes, go ahead.
Hello.
Go ahead, Praveen. We can hear you.
Hello.
All right, we're gonna come back to Praveen. We also have Kirti Raj on the phone line from. Okay, we're gonna get Kirti Raj. We'll come back to Praveen when we can get a clearer line with him. But I want to go back to our survivors here. Harish Iyer. When you grew up, we heard Mohammad Ali say that children who are going through this kind of abuse can't study, they can't focus, they can't play, they can't make friends. How desperate a situation of isolation does that turn out to be?
Oh, it was completely desperate, and in the sense that there was a time when I wouldn't go out, and when you get anally penetrated many a times, you can't walk properly. And what really happens is, what you really see in real life is it's translations of that, on a regular basis, in sense that I couldn't sit in my bench, I couldn't go out and play. I thought my body was disfigured. So when actually I had people looking at me, I used to think that my body is disfigured. Whenever they laughed, I thought that they're laughing at me. So I think it's a different level. So then many a times there are children who stop studying. There are many a times when children start studying even more, thinking that let me just drown myself into my books so that so that I at least prove to my family and the rest thing there's some purpose to my life. So for me in the beginning that happened. I used to study quite a lot, and those things, and you feel so isolated at times. I remember I used to speak to a tree. Sometimes I used to humanize various things around me. I used to speak to the tree. I used to speak to plants. I used to speak to insects. So there were a lot of these things. I know psychologically it could be termed as many things, but at that time I just needed someone to listen to me and listen to me without judging, and that is so important that you find this one person who would listen to you without judging, and I found that in a dog, not in any human being.
Well, thank God for that. Dog, Jerry?
See, I think Harish brings up a very important point, which is the psychological toll of certain laws that we have in our country. Because when a certain law criminalizes a certain form of behavior, for instance, you read out 377 criminalizes any kind of unnatural act against the order of nature and leaves loose a definition of what that means. Young men or young boys who get sexually abused are growing in an ecosystem that criminalizes even the healthy and consensual aspects of that relationship. And then in the entire ecosystem around psychologists or police officers or law enforcement agencies, all of them look at it as criminal behavior. Couple that with the patriarchal system of where boys and men are not allowed to kind of emote, express themselves, as one of the psychiatrists from this panel said. So we have a very strong repressive climate.
I'm going to come out and ask this question because I know there are a lot of people at home are probably thinking it. A lot of parents are still afraid of their sons walking up to them and saying, "Mom, I'm gay." And a lot of times they would be, that fear would somehow override the conversation if their sons walked up to them and said, "This is what happened to me."
True.
How do we communicate this to our parents? And I'm going to bring in Dr. Sidhwani. Parents are going to be afraid of hearing either one of these things, but it's important that they somehow find room in their hearts to not judge the victim.
Unfortunately, I think in my practice, I have seen parents judging a lot. Just giving an example of a 20 or 25-year-old boy who had come in. And of course, in the history, there was some form of sexual abuse. He reported he was gay, but there was no way his parents and his families were accepting it. So obviously, he was living in the closet. He was, forced to get married, but there was, because he had so many issues with his, sexual orientation, according to the family, he was sent to a psychologist to try and treat him. So I think
because
it's
they
very
believe it's
difficult.
a problem that can be fixed.
I think they do think, most parents are feeling that, being gay is an abnormal thing that can be fixed. Maybe he needs some psychological treatment, maybe it's a depression, maybe it's a psychosis, and, a doctor can treat it. And unfortunately, they are not able to accept the sexual orientation of the person.
Harish?
We always draw this link many a times. I have been asked, I am a proud homosexual. I'm out about it. And every time I speak about my sexuality, I'm asked this question. I'm even ridiculed and told by fellow gay activists many a times, saying that you should not bring about your abuse when you're speaking about your sexuality, simply because people will draw this connection. But I need to tell people there are more than 50% of boys who go through child sexual abuse. Of the 50% who more than 50% who get sexually abused, there are 54% of boys who go through sexual abuse. That simply means that at least the second or the third person whom you're meeting, the third or fourth man that you're meeting, is a survivor of child sexual abuse. Do we see all of them? And most often, the statistics, and I will not go by statistics, most often you see that there is an alarming number of men who are abusers. There is an alarming number of women also who are abusers. The stories don't come out. But do we see around 30% or 40% of people around us who are gay? Then you'll have LGBT people fighting for straight rights rather than all of us fighting for gay rights. So the thing is, we need to dissociate homosexuality and sexuality from abuse. Not every woman who wakes up, who gets sexually abused, gets up and says that, I would have turned a lesbian But just because I was abused by a man, I turned.
So my question was very specifically: do parents, if a child walked up or if a young boy walked up to their parents and said, "This is what has happened to me," I'll ask Mohammed this question: the fear ki, "Arey, mera beta gay to nahi hoye," that fear that a lot of Indian parents have, does that prevent them from connecting and actually protecting their child? Mohammed, क्या किसी ने आपके साथ ऐसा कुछ रिएक्शन मिला आपको जब आप अपने परिवार वालों से बात कर रहे थे?
नहीं ऐसा, मतलब मेरे को स्कूल में जब जैसा किसी कोई होते थे ना, कोई बच्चे ऐसे लड़के लोग ही जो रहते थे, तो अभी तक मेरे को कोई ऐसा बोलता है, क्योंकि मेरे को मैं गुस्सा रहता है हमेशा और मुझे ये सब में इंटरेस्ट ही नहीं, क्योंकि मेरे को अभी भी मेरा इस चीज़ में दिमाग नहीं चलता है। बस यही लगता है कि कब कोई ऐसा जो बोलता है मुझे मैं मारूं, है ना। और गुस्सा बहुत आता है मुझे कि कोई गे बोलता है, मैं कोई गे नहीं है, आई एम नॉट अ गे, है ना। मैं मर्द है, मेरे पास, मैं शादीशुदा भी है, बच्चा भी है मेरे पास, है ना। तो और अब मतलब बोलता है कोई कि ऐसा, मगर मेरे कभी ऐसा होता है क्योंकि मैं अकेला है, मेरा माँ बाप नहीं है, मैं स्ट्रीट बॉय है ना। तो मुझे बहुत ज़्यादा तकलीफ होता है कि मैं किसको कहेगा, मगर कोई प्लेटफॉर्म नहीं मिलता मेरे को अभी, ऐसा बोलने के लिए नहीं मिला मुझे आज तक कभी कि बोलूँ।
I just want to point out that when you said, of course, parents have a lot of fear in accepting whether the.
If you allow, I just wanted to.
I'll just come back to you. Shrradha, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying, of course, parents have a lot of fear in accepting whether the child has been abused, and especially the male child who is not supposed to be a victim. I think, but there's also, let's make it very clear, parents don't know how to react. A lot of parents, there's not much literature on, there's not much reading material, there's not much TV shows on how parents need to handle when the child comes and reports sexual abuse, and especially the male child. So as we've already seen on the show, there's a lot of focus on the females rather than the male abuse. So a lot of male abuse that has been spoken, most of it doesn't come to us until an age where the child has been detective of a depression or an anxiety problem or something called a post-traumatic stress disorder, where the child is not sleeping for days, he's bedwetting, which is probably if he was abused in the 2nd standard, he comes to us way up in the 8th, 10th, 9th standard when there's extreme pressure on him, and that's when he starts talking about the history of abuse. So we need to understand there's a lot of trauma associated with it, which the parents need to communicate with the child, understand, be empathetic. But also parents need to be educated on how to do this.
Right. I want to bring in the callers right now. Praveen is on the phone line again in Mumbai. Praveen?
Hey, can I...
Yeah, all right. Deepika, go ahead.
Yeah, Faye, a very important thing that I wish to bring to light is a real legal challenge which is happening right now, and I've read several. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello? Yeah, Faye, one legal challenge that we are seeing increasingly right now is, and where these victims of sexual abuse need to be protected, is when a case in POCSO is filed, and I'm specifically talking about cases where the perpetrator is a female, the boy is instead accused of rape. There was a case just 5 days ago which came in Delhi itself from Uttam Nagar, where the boy was sexually abused by this 35-year-old female, and when he complained and when his parents filed a case under POCSO, he was instead accused of rape by the female, and FIR was registered against the boy. Similar cases have happened in several other places. I remember a case, reading about a case in UP where the boy committed suicide because he was being threatened of a rape case where he was being sexually abused. So there's this legal challenge which is also arising right now, and I think that the police machinery really needs to look at it, because this is like victimizing the victim once again.
Absolutely. Let me just bring in Praveen right now. Praveen, who's back on the phone line with us. Praveen, if you can... Yes, go ahead, Praveen. We can hear you. We're all listening.
Yeah. Basically, what I would like to share is, like, from my experience, even I'm a survivor. I've gone through an abuse, and I feel somewhere the event of abuse wasn't that traumatizing than the after effect of it. Like like what I want to say is like we don't have a system around us which actually kind of takes us out of it, or rather we don't have anything that we can go and openly speak to our parents. We have a socializing agents which are more handicapping us, like it's like paralyzing us, because first of all we don't speak that openly to our children about sexuality, about sexual violences, about all on these topics that we call as taboo. So when you don't really have that open system to speak at home, then automatically it's that like you cannot even speak outside, because you've been trained in a way that you cannot actually speak on these things. And then there is religion that steps in. You have to actually carry out that vow of chastity, wherein you cannot have sex before marriage. And then for us, like I was trained in a way that it was a carnal sin, that if I have something that is as similar to sex before marriage, then it's like I violated my laws, or rather my religious vows.
Yes.
And that was even more threatening. And again, then everything just comes hand in hand. Being a male child, I feel that this solitude that was created around me because of the so-called moral world that we live in, because of the Sabhya Samaj that we live in, that we actually cannot come out in open and speak to our parents openly about what is happening towards us.
Right. Praveen, thank you for calling us. Dipansh is also on the phone line from New Delhi. Dipansh, go ahead.
Yeah. So, okay. So we have discussed about, I think the panel has presented a lot of, valid points about male sexual abuse. So, I would, just like to switch it up a little bit and talk about feminism. Now, no one is saying that women empowerment is wrong and that talking about women's rights is wrong. But what I really am trying to, figure out is that is the reason, amidst the slogans that are being raised for women empowerment, amidst these slogans,
yes,
I feel that the voices of, the victims of
What's your question, Dipansh?
They are, somehow these voices are not being heard amidst the slogans that are being raised for women empowerment. Like,
all right. So the question is the call for women empowerment by feminists in some way responsible for boys being sexually abused? Harish?
No. First of all, I would like to tell you that I call myself a proud feminist, and feminism, by the very definition, is to stand up for all genders and to speak about people and their rights regardless of gender. So those who discriminate are not really feminists, So yes, abuse doesn't discriminate. Right. Abuse happens with everybody. Abuser is also not discriminated. It happens. Anyone could be an abuser, man, woman, or transgender. So people who actually say that they are feminists and they do something like this, that is not the definition of feminism. So they are not feminists.
Right. Oh, I have to unfortunately wrap up this conversation right here, but I do promise that we will keep bringing it up, because 1 hour is not enough time to talk about what's actually going on. Like I said in the beginning of the show, we're just sending out one very clear message. Let's also protect our boys. Let's also protect our boys as parents, as teachers, as people who are around other people, as society, as members of the police force, as members of our lawmaking authorities. Let's write laws that protect our boys. Let's keep an eye on our children at whatever age. We have to keep them safe. I don't think there is a single parent in this country who doesn't want their child to live a wholesome and happy childhood. Here is a way to make sure that your child is wholesome and happy. Like the psychologist on the panel told us, make sure that your child is not displaying any unusual behavior, unusual tantrums, fear of going to school, fear of going for a particular maybe coaching class that they don't want to go to anymore. It is a telltale sign. You need to ask questions, and most of all, we need to create a safe environment where our children feel comfortable coming up to us and telling us what happened. They need to feel comfortable that they will not be judged for not being boys, for not being strong, for not swallowing their pain, for crying. We should allow our children, both male and female, the ability to tell us the truth, and to tell us the truth without judgment. Our appeal is that you speak to your children, both male and female, tonight about good touch and bad touch. talking about how consent is the most important thing, and about how sex should only happen between two consenting adults. If either of you are below the age of 18, and if either of you have not consented, that is a crime, and they should come to their parents about it as soon as it happens. I do hope that this has helped you in some way or the other, and we promise to continue talking about it. Thanks for watching.